This is You've Already Been Hacked, recorded on 6 February 2021. This week, we're going to follow up on the nightmare that keeps on giving, Solarwinds. We have a few different pieces on that, so let's get started. Hackers have had access to Solarwinds email systems for months. The hackers that were involved in the breach of Solarwinds have had access to the company's email system for almost a year, according to the Wall Street Journal. The new CEO of SolarWinds said in an interview that the hackers had accessed at least one of the company's Office 365 email accounts in December of 2019, beginning a chain of email compromises for other accounts. Quote, some emails were compromised. That led them to compromise other email accounts, and as a result of our broader Office 365 environment was compromised, unquote. This news came the same day that Reuters had reported that Chinese hackers had separately inserted malicious code into SolarWinds software, successfully compromising the Department of Agriculture's National Finance Center and potentially other federal agencies over the course of the past year. For those that don't know, the National Finance Center is a part of government that does payroll for way more than the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Right now, there are just about 50 agencies, departments, and other arms of the federal government that use the National Finance Center to process their payroll. Some of those include the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Justice, the Department of the Treasury, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the U.S. Capitol Police, the U.S. Coast Guard for civilian employees, and the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, just to name a few. With regard to the Chinese hack of SolarWinds, a spokesman for the company said this past week Chinese hackers had been able to access the SolarWinds Orion software through breaching the customer's network, and that breach was unrelated to Solarwinds, i.e., the larger nightmare that we have. Moving on to our other SolarWinds update, it relates to a story we started to cover last week, which was the federal judiciary and the U.S. court system being hacked with the SolarWinds compromise. The federal judiciary has set new requirements for filing sensitive documents because of this event. So it looks like, until recently, even the most secretive material, stuff about wiretaps, witnesses, and national security concerns were filed electronically. But that has now changed since SolarWinds. And now, the U.S. court system's new rules for filing such sensitive documents are, according to a memo released last week, quote, highly sensitive court documents, HSDs, filed with the federal courts will be accepted for filing in paper form or via a secure electronic device, such as a thumb drive, and stored in a secure standalone computer system. These sealed HSDs will not be uploaded to the CMECF. This new practice will not change current policies regarding public access to court records, since sealed records are confidential and currently not available to the public. This filing requirement does not include some of these type of documents, though. Pre-sentencing reports, pre-trial release reports, pleading related to cooperation in most criminal cases, social security records, administrative immigration records, and sealed filings in many civil cases, as they do not sufficiently, most likely, have the threshold of HSD treatment. Hackers probably gained access to a vast trove of confidential information hidden in the sealed documents, including trade secrets, espionage targets, whistleblower reports, and arrest warrants. It could take years to learn what information was obtained and what hackers are doing with it. The other part of this nightmare for the federal court system is that it's not actually clear that this intrusion has been stopped. Yet another challenge for the federal courts are that they are largely decentralized. There are 13 circuits in the U.S. court system, and each of them adopts its own rules and security measures. Some courts encrypt documents filed under seal, but others do not. according to court employees that spoke to the Associated Press. So criminal, civil, and bankruptcy filings are definitely believed to have been compromised, but not the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court system, which handles national security surveillance warrants, according to court employees who wanted to speak to the press via anonymity. Retired FBI agent and former chief of the National Counterintelligence Executive's Office believes the Russian officials will exploit whatever they can as they sift through the data, just as they did in 2016 when they leaked stolen Democratic National Committee emails during a U.S. presidential election. It could take years or decades to gouge what their intent really is. Storm Shield discloses they've had a security incident. The French cybersecurity company Storm Shield disclosed that their systems were hacked, allowing a threat actor to access the company's support ticket system and steal source code from Storm Shield's network security firewall software. The piece of software that is of concern is called the Unified Threat Management System, or UTM, for firewall devices, endpoint protection solutions, and secure file management. In the advisory that Storm Shield put out, they disclosed that their technical portal had used a support ticketing system that had been breached and may have allowed threat actors to review technical exchanges. Personal data and technical exchanges associated with certain accounts may have been, quote, consulted, unquote. The company immediately alerted the account owners on the portal and the French authorities, and as a precaution, the passwords of all accounts were reset when they applied additional measures to the portal in order to reinforce security. When Storm Shield discovered that some of the source code had been accessed, they did some forensic analysis and have at least said publicly that their investigations do not indicate that the source code has been modified, at least not at this time. To be safe, Storm Shield anticipates changing the code signing certificate used to ensure the integrity of their firmware releases and updates. After being informed about the attack, ANSI, the French agency, released a security advisory where they state that they have, quote, decided to place the qualifications and approvals of SNS and SNI products under observation, unquote. Kobolos malware targets high-performance computing networks. High-performance computing networks, some belonging to the world's most prominent organizations, are currently under attack by a newly discovered backdoor that gives hackers the ability to remotely execute commands of their choice, according to researchers this past Tuesday. The research security firm Etsy have named the malware Kobolos, and it is a backdoor that runs on Linux, FreeBSD, and Solaris, and code artifacts suggest it may have once run on AIX and the very, very old Windows 3.11 and Windows 95 platforms. The backdoor was released into the wild no later than 2019, and the group behind it was active throughout last year. Those infected with the malware include at least one university, an endpoint security company, some government agencies, a large ISP, and a few others. One high-performance computer compromised had no less than 512 gigabytes of RAM and almost a petabyte of storage. Kobolos' design is complex, and its functions are limited and almost entirely related to covert backdoor access. Once fully deployed, the malware gives access to the file system of the compromised computers and enables access to remote terminals that give the attackers the ability to run arbitrary commands. In one mode, the malware acts as a passive implant that opens a TCP port on an infected machine and waits for incoming connections from the attacker. A separate mode allows the malware to convert servers into command and control servers that other Kobolos infected devices may connect to. The infected machines can also be used as proxies that connect other servers compromised with Kobolos. These proxies can be chained so that the operators can use multiple compromised machines to reach their final targets, in a sense, creating an obfuscated network. Now, the good news or bad news, depending on your perspective, according to Etsy, is that the number of victims is currently measured in the tens, so very limited. The number comes from an internet scan that measures behavior that occurs when a connection is established with a compromised host from a specific source port. Victims were isolated in the United States, Europe, and Asia. The robustness of the malware combined with the small number of prominent targets demonstrates that Kobolus is the work of an advanced team of hackers, particularly in the less traveled path of non-Windows-based malware. So, we are talking about people that have time, energy, and resource. This means it's either a large-scale cyber criminal organization or possibly another nation state. As of now, it is not clear how Kobolus is getting installed. A component that steals credentials that administrators use to log into machines with SSH is one possibility, but it's kind of unlikely as the sole means of infection. It's also unclear precisely what Kobolus operators are doing with the malware. There are currently no signs that compromised systems are used to mine cryptocurrency or carry out other compute-intensive tasks. So they may be using these as pivot points, as we said earlier, C2 nodes, or they may just be lying there and wait until they are ready to do whatever it is they're looking to do. Microsoft has provided more information about the attackers targeting researchers. New details have emerged on how North Korean-linked APTs won the trust of experts and exploited Visual Studio to infect systems with comebacker malware. Microsoft has attributed the recent campaign to Zinc, a threat group associated with the Lazarus hacking group out of North Korea. They stated they first observed the malicious activity after Microsoft Defender for Endpoint detected an attack in progress. Researchers have stated with high confidence that the campaign, which they saw targeting pen testers, private offensive security researchers, and employees at security and tech companies, looked like the work of Zinc because of its observed tradecraft, infrastructure, malware patterns, and account affiliations. Now, as we stated in a previous podcast, the attackers were targeting researchers over the last several months using really sophisticated means, or at least a sophisticated backstopping, right? Creating their own research blogs, multiple Twitter profiles, and other social media so that they actually looked like legitimate members of the security research community. However, those that were attacked and potentially infected were running fully patched and up-to-date Windows 10 and Chrome browser versions. So whatever the hackers are doing, they're likely using a zero-day vulnerability in this campaign. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been successful at all. And with regard to all the backstopping that the attackers have done, it wasn't just a few accounts they created. They operated several accounts with approximately 2,000 plus combined followers, including many prominent security researchers. In terms of the Visual Studio part of the attack, the 365 Defender team said the malicious DLL file mentioned by researchers as setting up the C2 channel was disguised in browse.vc.db, one of the pre-built binaries typically found in Visual Studio. Microsoft Defender Endpoint also identified DLLs as comeback malware. Quote, a pre-build event with a PowerShell command was used to launch the comebacker via run DLL32, according to Microsoft. This use of malicious pre-build event is an innovative technique to gain execution. Phoenix Cryptor's malware ransom group has shut down operations and released their master decryption key. The ransomware operators shut down their operations this past week and have published their master decryption key to recover all the files they have taken for free. Phoenix is also known as Xenoff and Phoenix Cryptor, and they began operating in June of 2020 and had been steadily encrypting victims ever since. The ransomware operation was not as widely active as others that we've discussed, such as Revel and NetWalker, but starting in November 2020, it picked up a bit, as shown in the files that they have now published on the internet. In a Twitter post claiming to be from one of the admins, the ransomware group announced it had shut down. The post read, "I'm one of the Phonics team admins. You know about Phonics team, but we have come to the conclusion. We should use our abilities in positive ways and help others. Also, ransomware source is completely deleted, but some of the team members are in disagreement with the closure of the project. Like the Telegram channel admin who is trying to scam people in Telegram channels by selling fake source and data. Anyway, now main admin has decided to put all previous work aside and decrypt all infective systems at no cost. And the decryption key will be available to the public. The final statement of the team will be announced soon." In a different tweet, the admin shared a link to the RAR, or essentially a zip file, named Phonics Decryptor, containing both the decryptor and the master private decryption key. This decryption tool is not a decryptor that can be used by a victim to decrypt their files easily, but instead is an admin tool used internally by the ransomware game, so they have now just released their stuff into the wild. Most ransomware operations allow victims to send a few encrypted files that they will decrypt for free to prove that they can do so. The decryptor released this past week is from the Phonics ransomware operators tool when performing these free tests for decryption and does not allow victims to decrypt an entire computer. Even considering that, it can only decrypt one file at a time. It has a very confusing instruction set and is prone to crashing, so best of luck using it. Make sure you're doing that on a disconnected system so that in case there's extra value or other malware in there, it doesn't infect your network again, please. The good news from researchers at Bleeping Computer is that the master keys work, but only on some of the Phonics ransomware versions. However, Emisoft's decryptor will decrypt all versions of the ransomware, which include the .phonics, all caps, .repeater, and .xenov encrypted file extensions. There's no ETA as to when the decryptor will be released, but if you are a victim of this ransomware, a solution should be available soon, so keep your eyes out for it. Vulnerabilities have been found in Fuji Electric Industrial Control System products. Fuji's TELUS Lite V Simulator and V Server Lite can allow attackers to take advantage of operational technology, or OT-IT system convergence tools on factory floors, utility plants, and other ICS providers. The Fuji Electric software is vulnerable to several high-severity arbitrary code extension security bugs, according to a federal warning. Authorities are warning the flaws could allow physical attacks on factory and critical infrastructure equipment. The warning, or the vulnerabilities, carry a CVSS severity rating of 7.8. And the two pieces of software, vSimulator and vServer, make up a comprehensive human-machine interface system used to remotely monitor and collect production data in real time and control a variety of industrial and control infrastructure gear. This software package can be used to interface with various manufacturers' programmable logic controllers, temperature controllers, inverters, so on and so forth. Worse yet is that these security bugs require low skill levels to exploit, according to advisory from CISA this past week. They're not exploitable remotely. That's a plus. So non-local attackers would have to gain initial access to users' computers before carrying out any malicious activity. However, this is not an impossible hurdle, as we've seen with everything else we always talk about. While it's best practice to keep industrial environments physically separated on different networks, this is something that is going away in ICS. They are now basically connected to the internet, and although they're typically firewalled off, this is just a increasing attack surface that is getting more and more exposed to the internet. And finally, in a piece of good news, IBM has announced a grant program to help schools with ransomware protection. This past Thursday, IBM announced a $3 million grant program that is expected to go towards protecting K-12 schools against ransomware and other cyber attacks, which have increased significantly as we've seen this past year, 2020, and now into 2021, due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The grant program will be awarded to 6 public school districts across the United States, with each district getting $500,000. School districts have until March 1st to apply for the grants. 6 to 10 IBM volunteers will be deployed to each of the winning districts to help implement cybersecurity initiatives. The services that are going to be provided include implementing cybersecurity training, updating incident response plans, and improving coordination in the event of a cyber attack. IBM and Morning Consult also released a study in conjunction with the grants on the impact of cyber attacks on K-12 institutions over the past year. The study surveyed 1,000 educators and administrators and found that almost 60% were not sure that they had ever received cyber training for the move to remote learning. More than half said their limited budgets were a barrier to instituting these trainings. Despite escalating cyber attacks, which negatively impacted the school districts of Miami-Dade County, Baltimore County, Maryland, and Fairfax County, Virginia, among many others this past year, around half of those surveyed did not express concern over their own institutions being attacked. That's all for the news this week. I'm your professor of cyber risk. We'll talk again soon. If you like this podcast, share it with your colleagues and friends. Your support is how we are able to continue to grow and provide this content. Thank you.